Your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Channa.
And I'm Raisha Sehgal. On the show today, our top focus is from India, where the budget session of Parliament will begin today at 10 a.m. local time with the Indian President's address to a joint sitting of both the houses. India's Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be presenting the interim budget on February 1st.
Also on the show today, EU has failed to convince Southeast Asian nations to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine ahead of a foreign ministers meeting in Brussels. We will be tracking all the developments closely right here on World DNA. This and a lot more in the next 60 minutes. Let's get you started with the headlines.
Hamas confirms it is studying a three-phase proposal for truce in Gaza. Meanwhile, hardline Netanyahu government members threaten to collapse coalition if deal is not to their liking.
US President Joe Biden says he has made up his mind on how to respond to Jordan-based drone attack. President of the United States weighs punishing Iran-backed militias without triggering wider war.
European Union fails to convince Southeast Asian nations to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine ahead of foreign ministers meeting in Brussels on Friday.
Pakistan's Lahore High Court directs country's election commission to reply to petition by jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan challenging his trial by next week.
Police in India's mountain state of Himachal Pradesh rescued 300 tourists stranded near the Atal Tunnel in Rohtang district after heavy snowfall.
On league leaders Liverpool to 2 points.
And one becomes two in almost a blink of an eye. Moves Arsenal back into the thick of the race.
Hamas militant group's political leader Ismail Haniyeh has confirmed that it is studying a new proposal to pause the fighting in the Gaza Strip.
Haniyeh said that the group had been invited to discuss a framework set out by Israel, US, Qatar and Egypt. Well, the proposal comes as one of the most serious peace initiatives in the months-long war between Israel and Hamas.
Now, reports say that the new proposal aims at a 6-week truce where more Israeli hostages would be exchanged for Palestinian prisoners in return. The Hamas leader stressed that the group's priorities were a permanent ceasefire and full Israeli withdrawal, but Israel's Prime Minister ruled them out. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu insists the war would not end until the elimination of Hamas and the release of all Israeli hostages.
Now, during a week-long ceasefire in late November, 105 Israeli and foreign hostages were freed in exchange for 240 Palestinians held in Israeli jails.
Israel says 136 hostages are still being held. although about 24 of them are presumed dead. Now, on Sunday, Qatar's Prime Minister, along with top intelligence officials from US and Egypt, held talks in Paris. The heads of Israeli intelligence and security agencies also attended the meet. Reports say they agreed on the terms of a framework for a second pause in the fighting.
Now, such a pause may see Hamas releasing any remaining elderly, women and child hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners during an initial period of 6 weeks, that is. Now, if successful, there could be another 2 phases of swaps, with male Israeli soldiers being eventually released.
The Israeli Prime Minister's office called the talks constructive, but noted that there were significant gaps which the parties will continue to discuss.
I hear talks of all sorts of deals, so I want to make it clear. We will not end this war without achieving all of our goals. This means the elimination of Hamas, the return of all our abductees, and the promise that Gaza will no longer pose a threat to Israel. We will not pull out the IDF from Gaza Strip, and we will not release thousands of terrorists.
Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said earlier this week that confirmed talks of a new truce called it a strong and compelling deal.
As the Secretary noted, we do believe it is a strong proposal that's on the table. We do believe it's a proposal that, it is a proposal that would could lead to a sustained pause in fighting and the return of hostages, something that has been a goal of the United States and other countries in the region.
The diplomatic advances were announced hours after Israeli commandos disguised as medical workers and Muslim women stormed into a hospital in the West Bank in an undercover raid. The Israeli forces killed 3 Palestinian militants, including a paralyzed fighter shot dead on the bed where he was being treated.
At its height, the Islamic State held about a third of Syria and 40% of Iraq. Well, by 2017, ISIS had lost 95% of its territory, including its 2 biggest properties.
Now, of course, those 2 biggest properties were Mosul, Iraq's second largest city, and the northern Syrian city of Raqqa, its nominal capital. But the terror group is attempting a comeback now, and a top US general's warning has set the alarm bells ringing.
Head of the US-led coalition fighting ISIS has said that the terror group's operations across West Asia are being strengthened by the fallout from the war between Israel and the Hamas militants. Major General Joel Wowell, who holds the mission against ISIS in Iraq and Syria, said that there had been a 200% rise in suspected attacks by the group in the past 3 months. As for the US general, strikes by Iran-backed militias in West Asia have forced counter-ISIS troops to focus on defense. General Wowell said, and I'm quoting him here, "The focus on defense has allowed it, the tactical level, ISIS cells to start doing more things." He cited an uptick in attacks in Syria and Iraq in the last 60 days in particular.
Now, let's take a look at the terror group's new tactics in Asia. ISIS has switched tactics since the collapse of its caliphate and a string of other setbacks in West Asia. Once based in Syria's Raqqa and Iraq's Mosul, the group took refuge in the hinterlands of the 2 fractured countries. Its fighters are scattered in autonomous cells, its leadership is clandestine, and its overall size is hard to quantify. Now, the UN estimates that the overall size is at around 10,000 fighters in ISIS heartlands. As per Iraqi government of security officials, the movement went underground and formed sleeper cells that launch hit-and-run attacks. Now, all key foreign fighters fled Iraq for countries such as Afghanistan, Syria and Pakistan. Most have joined Islamic State's Khorasan branch, which is active along Iran's borders with Afghanistan and Pakistan. Now, the group has been in decline in Yemen, though. ISIS extremists have carried out a string of attacks on Turkish soil, including against a nightclub in Istanbul in 2017 that left 39 people dead. Now, let's now analyze ISIS' presence in Africa. The terror group has made its mark in parts of the continent. In Libya, let's start with there, where it once held a strip of territory on the Mediterranean coast, the group is weaker now. However, it could still exploit the country's ongoing conflict. A UN report last year estimated that in Egypt's Sinai province, there may be between 800 to 1,200 fighters loyal to ISIS. Then in Uganda, militants from ISIS-allied democratic forces have staged a series of attacks in recent months. The group that started as an uprising in Uganda has largely moved its operations to neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, where it has staged multiple attacks. Several other groups have pledged allegiance to ISIS in West Africa and across the entire Sahel region of Africa. Now, affiliates have control of large areas of rural Mali, Niger, and northern Burkina Faso and into North Africa. In January 2023, the US military carried out an operation that killed a senior ISIS leader in northern Somalia. A UN report raised concerns that groups like ISIS could exploit the political instability and violence in Sudan.
Another global news, Shivan. European Union leaders are set to meet in Brussels on Thursday to try and agree on granting more financial aid to Ukraine.
However, ahead of the meeting, a senior EU official has said that the talks remain difficult despite Hungary signalling its readiness for a compromise.
Well, the EU leaders will try to extend over $50 billion worth of aid to Kiev through 2027. The meeting also seeks to replenish a military fund to arm Ukraine as it fights Russia's almost two-year-old invasion.
But Hungary, that maintains close relations with Russia, has already blocked the aid package once last month. It has also voiced opposition to topping up the military fund as the EU mounts pressure on Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban to agree. Its officials have also said that Budapest's conditions for lifting its veto are not acceptable to the bloc's other 26 member states.
On Friday, EU foreign ministers will also meet their counterparts from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, or ASEAN. But ahead of the meeting, the European Union has failed to convince ASEAN nations to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A draft statement says that most members strongly condemn the war in Ukraine, but it stops short of naming Moscow. It adds that there are different assessments of the situation and sanctions.
Meanwhile, in Washington, CIA Director Bill Burns has warned that Ukraine will face a tough year in 2024, and cutting off US aid to Kiev would be an error of historic proportions. Burns also said that if the West abandons Ukraine at this point, it could be a win for China. He suggested that China could adopt a more aggressive stance towards Taiwan if it saw America's support for Ukraine diminishing.
But even as Kiev seeks additional aid, all is not well within the Ukrainian military. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has asked his most senior military commander, Valery Zalensevy, to step down. But the popular general has refused, triggering speculation that he will be dismissed instead. Tensions between the two have been simmering for quite some time now, and that is after Ukraine's counter-offensive failed to deliver. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry has, however, denied media reports that the commander-in-chief has been dismissed. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has come under renewed pressure to cut immigration in the country.
Well, the news comes as new figures suggest that Britain will need to build at least 156,000 homes a year just to cope with the number of migrants landing up in the UK. Now, according to new projections from the Office for National Statistics, net migration will add an extra 6 million people to the population by 2026. The findings further suggest that based on current and past trends, an extra 541,000 people will be added through natural growth. It means that UK's overall population is projected to grow by about 6.7 million to reach 73.7 million in 2036, up from 67 million at the time of the 2021 census. Analysis by a think tank, Center for Policy Studies, suggests that over the 5 years between 2021 and 2026, this overall growth in population will require a total of 5.7 million more homes to be built.
At least 23 countries have fallen to their lowest ever level in the 2023 Global Corruption Index.
Now, global watchdog Transparency International has said that efforts to fight corruption are faltering worldwide. In fact, high-scoring democracies like Iceland, the Netherlands and Sweden have also experienced a decline in the latest index.
The index ranks 180 countries by the levels of public sector corruption. The scale of 0 to 100 is used by the watchdog. It places the least corrupt countries at the top. And as per the index, the higher the rank and the points, the lower the corruption. Denmark led the index for the 6th consecutive year with a score of 90. That was followed by Finland with 87 and New Zealand with a score of 85. Countries like Norway, Singapore and Sweden rounded up in the top 6 positions as one of the least corrupt countries globally.
Meanwhile, the United States has been ranked at 24, the same as last year with a score of 69 points. India, on the other hand, ranked 93 with 39 points. The country's overall score remained largely unchanged. In 2023, India's score was 39, while in 2022 it was 40. The report also mentioned that Pakistan, which is ranked at the 113th place, and Sri Lanka at 115th place, are being weighed down because of debt burdens and political instability.
Well, China held the 76th rank and has been lauded for its anti-corruption crackdown. Beijing punished over 3.7 million public officials over corruption charges in the last year. However, Transparency International warned that punishment will not act as a long-term deterrent. Now, at the bottom of the list with the highest corruption count was Somalia with a score of 11 points. It was followed by South Sudan, Syria and Venezuela with 13 points each. States with authoritarian regimes also found a place at the bottom, while North Korea stood at 17 points. Myanmar and Afghanistan earned just 20 points each. In other global news, and shifting focus to China. In China, prosecuted 110,000 Communist Party officials for corruption last year.
Now, the figures were given by Beijing's top anti-corruption body, the Central Commission for Discipline Election. Now, it said that the disciplinary cases covered breach of 8 rules on official conduct laid down by President Xi Jinping after he took over as the head of the party in late 2012. Beijing says that the rules are aimed at ensuring a responsible working style for officials. They cover everything from a ban on extravagant receptions to avoiding unnecessary meetings and red tape.
Well, of those punished, 41,000 officials reportedly failed to carry out their duties properly by failing to take responsibility or, and I'm quoting here, paying lip service to their orders. 40,000 other officials were punished for receiving expensive gifts, money or attending lavish galas and celebrations. Meanwhile, 10,000 officials allegedly received unapproved benefits.
Now, as per reports, the Commission last year launched corruption probes against a record number of 45 senior officials. Several officials were abruptly dismissed by China's national legislative body. Beijing has indicated that the crackdown will continue this year as well. Earlier this month, Xi Jinping said the CCP must continue to fight graft and other problems. The Indian Navy is on a rescue mission. In the past 72 hours, Indian Navy warships have rescued Pakistani crew members, Iranian crew members, and in the latest has helped rescue a hijacked Sri Lankan fishing vessel along the Somalian coast.
Well, Shivan, this is India's third successful operation in the past 3 days only. Well, the Indian Navy responded to a distress or an SOS call regarding the hijacking of a Sri Lankan fishing vessel. Sri Lanka's multi-day fishing trawler was hijacked by 3 pirates on the 27th of January. The Indian Navy deployed INS Sharda from Kochi and also tasked the advanced Hail Sea Guardian drone to locate and intercept the hijacked fishing vessel.
Sri Lankan Navy and Seychelles Defence Forces coordinated with the Indian Navy here. The pirates have surrendered to the Seychelles Coast Guard and all 6 crew members are safe and the vessel has been escorted to Seychelles.
While speaking on the Indian Navy's proactive role in the Red Sea region, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar has said India's greater capability and reputation entails the need to help such situations. Take a listen.
India's greater capability and our own interests and our reputation today warrant that we actually help out in difficult situations. We will not be considered a responsible country if bad things are happening around our neighborhood and we say, I got nothing to do with this. If you got nothing to do when neighborhood is in trouble, when you are in trouble, neighborhood will say the same. So we have actually in the last 10 years developed a very, I would say, powerful narrative. It could be what is happening today.
On 28th of January, the Indian Navy responded to its first distress call. This is when its INS Sumitra intercepted an Iranian vessel, which led to the safe release of 17 Iranian crew members.
Well, within a span of 36 hours, Indian Navy warship INS Sumitra rescued a hijacked fishing vessel Al-Naimi along the east of Somalian coast. 19 Pakistani nationals were rescued in this mission.
The hijackings of Somalia have fueled concerns about a resurgence of raids in the Indian Ocean region by opportunistic pirates. Now, this comes at the backdrop of attacks in the Red Sea, where the Iran-backed Houthi rebels claim to attack Israeli vessels. The Indian Navy has deployed at least 12 warships in the region to avoid escalation of piracy in the larger domain of the Indian Ocean.
Staying on with stories from India. In the Indian state of Himachal Pradesh, over 300 tourists were left stranded after a night of intense snowfall.
Now, all of them have been rescued by the state's police.
Well, according to the police officials there, over 50 vehicles were stuck near the Atal Tunnel in popular tourist destination Rohtang. Soon after, a rescue operation was conducted and all tourists were safely evacuated.
Now, this comes after the Indian Meteorological Department forecast heavy snowfall and rainfall in several areas of Himachal Pradesh. An orange alert was also issued in parts of the state. In high altitude areas, snowfall is predicted to continue for much of the current week. The inaugural session of joint military exercise between India and Saudi Arabia was held in Rajasthan's Suratgarh. The exercise focuses on training for joint operations in semi-desert terrain and also enhances the camaraderie between the troops. Take a look at this.
time now for a quick short break.
Don't go anywhere. Of course, this is World DNA. We will be back after these messages. When we get back, we will be bringing our focus to Hong Kong, which has announced plans for a new law that will expand its national security powers. There is urgency behind this law to be enacted. We will be tracking those developments closely.
Also on the other side of World DNA, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, raised its prediction for global growth this year, but it also issued a warning about the risks of inflation and wars. We'll get you all the details on the other side of World DNA. Don't go anywhere. You're watching Beyond World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Inflation, geopolitical tensions, growth, and India's transformational journey from resurgence to resilience. We know the numbers and information can be daunting, but we break down everything and cut out the noise, to give you everything you need to know to stay ahead on the big day. Maldivian parliament members come to blows. Brawl over new pro-China cabinet plan.
While troubles continue to mount for Maldives President Mohamed Muizzu, if the opposition parties return with a collective strength of over 62 in the expanded parliament, they can pass an impeachment motion to oust President Muizzu.
Heat on Muizzu, impeachment calls emerge.
Current government disrupted the process to stop the vote from being taken. This is a complete ruckus in Parliament at the moment.
WION exposes a deepening mess.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA. This is us, of course. I'm Shivan Channa. With me is Rehisha Segal, my colleague. And of course, we're bringing you all the biggest updates. In the first half hour of the show, we brought you the latest updates from the European Union. Well, there is a meeting which is scheduled to happen on Thursday where they will be meeting to discuss more military aid for Ukraine. Will Hungary stand in the middle of that as it did earlier? Well, we will be bringing all the updates for you.
Right. We also spoke about the Global Corruption Index, where at least 23 countries have fallen to the lowest ever level in 2023. A lot more lined up on the show right now, but first, the headlines.
US President Joe Biden says he has made up his mind on how to respond to Jordan-based drone attack. The President of the United States weighs punishing Iran-backed militias without triggering a wider war.
Hamas confirms it is studying a three-phase proposal for truce in Gaza. Meanwhile, hardline Netanyahu government members threaten to collapse the coalition if deal is not to their liking.
European Union fails to convince Southeast Asian nations to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine ahead of foreign ministers' meeting in Brussels on Friday.
Pakistan's Lahore High Court directs country's election commission to reply to petition by jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan challenging his trial by next week.
The police in India's northern state of Himachal Pradesh rescued 300 tourists stranded near the Atal Tunnel in Rohtang district after heavy snowfall.
Ashraf Hakimi's missed penalty proves costly for Morocco as South Africa stunned the 2022 World Cup semi-finalists 2-0 to reach the quarter-final of the Africa Cup of Nations.
US President Joe Biden says that he has made up his mind on how to respond to a drone attack that killed US service members in Jordan.
The remarks come as the embattled US president weighs options to punish Iran-backed militias without triggering a wider war in the region. Take a listen.
Yes. I do hold them responsible in the sense that they're supplying the weapons to the people who did it.
Biden, speaking to reporters as he left the White House on a campaign trip to Florida, did not elaborate on his decision, which came after consultations with top advisors at the White House.
Later, the White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby told the reporters that aboard Air Force One, the United States could respond more than once. Now, 3 US service members were killed and at least 34 wounded in a drone attack by Iran-backed militants on US troops in northeastern Jordan. Biden has been weighing his options amid expectations that there will be a retaliatory strikes, but the timing of the response has not been clear as of now. Biden said that the US does not need a wider war in West Asia. Meanwhile, Hong Kong's government has said that it has started to work on a new national security law. Well, what is this new law and how different is it from the current one? My colleague Shivan breaks it down for you. Shivan, over to you.
Thanks, Reisha. Now, Hong Kong, well, it's going to have a new national security law. Of course, these national security powers that it builds on are going to be sweeping legislations that Beijing imposed on the city back in 2020. Now, today I'll decode the proposed national security plan, which reports suggest could have deep ramifications for the city's status as a global financial hub. Now, according to the city's chief executive, the package known as Article 23 will be added to Hong Kong's mini constitution and work in concert with the existing national security law imposed by China. Moreover, Hong Kong's government has announced a public consultation period that is said to be open until the 28th of February. The proposed law is designed to update or create new laws, mainly to prohibit treason, sabotage, sedition, theft of state secrets, espionage and external interference. Now, external interference is one aspect which will be repeated several times through in Article 23. Now, let me tell you why the new laws are being considered now. Since the British handed Hong Kong back to China in 1997, the city has been under a one country, two systems regime in which the legal and court structures are separate from the mainland. Under its mini constitution known as the Basic Law, Hong Kong is required to enact a law combating 7 security-related crimes, including treason and espionage. The first legislative attempt in 2003 was shelved after 500,000 Hong Kongers took to the streets to protest the move. However, after a massive pro-democracy protest in 2019, the central government of China imposed a separate national security law on the city in 2020. Now, before we move on further from there, let's take a listen to what the chief executive of Hong Kong, John Lee, says about the new proposed national security laws.
We can't wait. I've said it very clearly. We can't afford to wait. It's for 26 years we've been waiting. We shouldn't wait any longer. The threats to national security, they are real. We have experienced all these threats. We have suffered from them badly. We were all very heartbreaking. We still remember the pain, the sorrow. We don't want to go through that painful experience again.
And for more on this, we're now being joined by Patrick Falk from Hong Kong. Hi Patrick, welcome to the show.
Patrick, yes, let's get started with that.
So the Hong Kong leaders have said that they want to tighten national security laws as soon as possible. Talk to us about the urgency of implementing the laws and how different it is from the current one.
Well, authorities certainly aren't wasting any time in setting this in motion. Shortly after the press briefing that John Lee gave on Tuesday morning, it was followed up by a meeting of the legislature to get this consultation process moving forward right away. John Lee has said previously that the new Article 23 legislation has to be implemented by this year. So he's moving forward with it as quickly as possible, as you mentioned, because the existing legislation that Hong Kong has right now, namely the Beijing-imposed national security law, he described as being like a car with missing parts. So Article 23 will specifically include laws against things like sedition, espionage, and as you mentioned, external interference. So it will prohibit any sort of political activity by any sort of foreign political organization in Hong Kong. He has said that this is urgently required, partly because of the environment that Hong Kong is facing right now, and particularly in the run-up to the US presidential election. That is why this is happening so quickly right now.
Patrick, I also wanted to get your thoughts on this. Now, do you feel that the new proposed law could be seen as one that could quash dissent by certain factions?
Well, I mean, you know, a lot of that has already happened under the existing national security law that was imposed by Beijing in 2020. So it's very difficult to say how this is going to work differently, but we did hear yesterday from authorities saying that the new law must work in sync with the existing legislation that is in place. Bear in mind that Article 23 is part of Hong Kong's mini-constitution, which has been in place since 1997. It is required by law to enact this legislation. So that's what John Lee's talking about when he says that Hong Kong has been waiting 26 years for this already. So, there is obviously concern that it is going to tighten civil liberties in Hong Kong, but authorities did go to some length to say that they would do more to educate people about the legislation. John Lee said that he's in no doubt that there will be people bad-mouthing this law, but he will be doing his utmost to try and explain it to diplomats and the business community in particular that will no doubt have a lot of concerns about it.
All right, that was Patrick Falk joining us from Hong Kong. Thank you for sharing all your insights, Patrick.
And now to the world of business. Proceedings for the budget session of the Indian Parliament in India's capital, New Delhi, are set to begin in just a short while from now.
Now, this will be the last session of the 17th Lok Sabha, or Parliament's lower house. The session is expected to begin with President Draupadi Murmu's special joint address to both houses. This will be the Indian President's first address in the new Parliament building ever since it was inaugurated in May last year.
On Thursday, India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will be presenting the interim budget for financial year 2025. Unlike previous years, this will not be a complete budget as Lok Sabha elections are slated to be held in just a few months from now.
Now, ahead of the budget session, the Indian government had convened an all-party meeting which also resulted in the suspension for 14 members of parliament being revoked. An all-party meeting is a customary practice and is held before every parliamentary session. The meeting allows leaders across party lines to highlight the issues that they would want to raise once the session begins. The International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, raised its prediction for global growth this year, but it also issued a warning about the risks of inflation and wars.
The global body cited China's fiscal stimulus and the United States' stronger than expected expansion as the reasons for the growth upgrade. Well, in its latest quarterly outlook, the fund predicted that global growth would reach 3.1% this year, which is up from 2.9% predicted in October. The fund left its 3.2% estimate for 2025 unchanged. Still, growth is predicted to be lower than in the 2 decades, that is, before the pandemic, when it averaged 3.8%.
The IMF cited tighter central bank policies and public expenditure cuts in some nations as the reasons. Now, IMF chief economist Pierre-Olivier said the global economy continues to display remarkable resilience and we are now in the final descent towards a soft landing, with inflation declining steadily and growth holding up. However, he also added here that, again I'm quoting him, but the pace of expansion remains on the slow side and there might be turbulence ahead.
Well, for this year, regional breakdown showed an upgrade to growth forecast in the US, China, India, Russia and Brazil. On the other hand, the fund cut predictions for the Euro area, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Japan and Argentina. IMF warned that 2024 will see a major slowdown in Israel's economic growth as its war with Hamas and Gaza rages on. Well, for the UK, the fund left its forecast unchanged but cautioned on the planned tax cuts in the upcoming budget.
The IMF listed several downside risks that include new commodity price spikes brought on by geopolitical shocks and disruptions to global supply chains from the Red Sea crisis. Central banks keep rates higher for longer from persistently high inflation. The fund also repeated its warning about the possible fragmentation of global trade into rival blocs. It predicts world trade growth of 3.3% in 2024 and 3.6% in 2025, well below the historical average rate of 4.9%.
Let's now take a look at the updates from the world of technology.
Indian websites, including those of the Army, Census of India and Banaras Hindu University, were reportedly breached by Indonesian hackers this month. According to experts, the motive could be hacktivism, which targets sites for political or social reasons. Experts are also of the opinion that the hacks are possibly linked to India's position in the Israel-Hamas war. As per reports, the attacks aim not only to bring down and deface government websites, but also to compromise critical infrastructure, steal confidential data, and leak sensitive information.
The Indian Army site was down for over 2 hours on January 13th. The Census of India site was hacked the same day, and Banaras Hindu University site was breached the next day by Indonesian hackers. The Indian Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology is now issuing a standard operating procedure for these potential attacks.
Elon Musk's social media platform X has restored searches for Taylor Swift after briefly blocking users from searching her name. The block was put in place due to the circulation of pornographic deepfake images of the singer. The singer's name now shows normal tweet results, which earlier resulted in an error message and a prompt for users to retry their search.
Last week, explicit deepfake images of Swift emerged on X, which utilized AI image generation. The social media platform was forced to take temporary action to ensure user safety due to the virality of the deepfakes. Reports say X has still blocked the term Taylor Swift AI.
The Biden administration has initiated a new requirement for major AI developers to disclose safety test results to the US government. The White House AI Council recently met to review progress on President Biden's executive order that mandates AI companies to share safety test information with the Commerce Department. Under the Defense Production Act, these companies are obliged to disclose vital safety test results before releasing AI systems to the public.
Aligning with the Biden administration's order, the National Institute of Standards and Technology will come out with a uniform framework for assessing safety. Additionally, 9 federal agencies completed risk assessments for AI use in critical national infrastructure like the electric grid. The government is actively hiring AI experts and data scientists to ensure regulators are equipped to manage this transformative technology.
Germany says it will approve the European Union's AI Act that establishes rules for AI development. The European Union in December reached a provisional deal for AI rules, but said that it has to be agreed to by members and the European Parliament. According to Germany's digital minister, the government has secured innovation-friendly rules that benefit small and medium-sized businesses. The agreements lays the foundations for trustworthy AI, marking the end of wrangling over Germany's position.
Let's see what's making news in the world of sports. Arsenal kept the pressure on Premier League leaders